It's the end of the decade, which I'm told is a pretty special moment. Like, from what I gather, it only comes around once every 8 years or so, which is probably rare enough to merit some kind of celebration, right? I do have my hands a bit full as my roast of the year's top 5 worst anime is nearing the 40-minute mark. I have a problem. But I guess that's all the more reason to find something to be positive about in the meantime. The 2010s were a pretty incredible time to be an otaku, all things considered, and there are far too many great anime that I haven't even seen yet, not to mention a bunch I haven't gotten around to finishing, for me to feel confident trying to rank the best of them. But my personal favorites, that I can do, and have done, in a standard top 10 list format, which you're about to watch. Enjoy! Sorry, I already spent most of my funny on the worst anime thing. My 10th favorite anime of the 2010s, Space Brothers, is a dry, ironically down-to-earth sci-fi dramedy anime about a pair of brothers who promised each other they'd go to space after seeing a UFO when they were young. As the series begins, the younger brother, clean-cut Nanba Hibito, is already well on his way to making that dream a reality, having been selected as the first Japanese person to walk on the moon, while the older brother, rough-around-the-edges Nanba Muta, has settled for a less stellar but no less respectable career as an auto engineer. When Muta loses his job after giving his boss the old Zinedine Zidane, he decides to use his sudden surplus of free time to finally apply for Japan's Aerospace Exploration Agency, or JAXA, and pursue his childhood dream in earnest. What follows is a touching personal journey of growth and self-discovery, delivered alongside some fantastic comedy and a guided tour through some of the real-world facilities, organizations, and training programs that support space exploration today. The science geek in me absolutely loves the realistic and well-researched look into the world of modern and near-future space agencies that Space Brothers provides. Its exploration of logistical and ethical questions our species might face in the near future is fascinating. But what I think I love most about the series is the inspiring idea that its hero, the unhappy salaryman turned astronaut Muta, represents. That it's never too late to start reaching for the stars again. Space Brothers isn't a show for everyone. If you're not into dry, technical subject matter and character-driven, dialogue-heavy drama doesn't excite you enough to get you on board for 99 episodes, most of the other shows on this list will probably be more your speed, but if a mature, involving, realistic drama about adults trying to better themselves with more than a dash of hard science fiction mixed in sounds like something you'd enjoy, this is, I think, one of the most rewarding anime viewing experiences out there. Though sadly, not one of the most complete. The series was put on hiatus 2 years into production after catching up to the manga, and it just kinda never came back. So to get the full story, you will eventually have to make the jump to Chuya Koyama's manga, which is still great, but lacks the anime's top-notch voice acting and ballin' OPs. Speaking of great OPs and manga with better endings than their anime adaptations, my 9th favorite show of the decade is Erased. As much as the series suffers due to its truncated finale, its adaptation of the first 3/4 of Kei Sanbei's time-bending supernatural thriller manga is more than brilliant enough to make up for that deficit. And I have so many fond memories of watching and rewatching this show with Yazzie that even if it weren't so great in its own right, it would always have a special place in my heart. In terms of animation, layouts, sound design, music, and acting, few anime out there are quite as captivating to behold or aesthetically consistent as this one. Tomohiko Ito and the team of immensely talented animators and directors working under him infuse practically every cut, shot, and scene of this series with layers upon layers of meaning and emotion. Almost every episode of this show took my breath away at least once in one way or another. More often than not, I was gasping right alongside its wonderful characters. Satoru's struggle to break free of and redefine his traumatic past is inspiring. His sharp-witted mother's kindly doting strikes the perfect balance between overbearing and sweet. His schoolmates all have complex inner worlds while remaining convincing as children. And then, of course, there's Kaio, a broken, scared, lonely little girl whose bright-eyed response to even the tiniest hints of love is at once heartwarming and heartbreaking. You just can't help wanting to protect her. There are several scenes in this anime marking emotional turning points for Kaio that will forever be etched into my brain. The way that she reacts to her first home-cooked meal in years is hands down one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen in anime or any other medium. Erased's central mystery might not be all that complicated, or mysterious for that matter, but Even though I could often see where it was going from a mile away, the series still managed to surprise me simply through how these characters grow, interact, connect, and reconnect with each other across Satoru's various time jumps. And when it does ratchet up the tension, it proves to be remarkably deft at making hearts pound and making its villains seem menacing. In spite of its flaws, I absolutely love Erased, and I'm not done heaping praise on vaguely overhyped anime from 2016 just yet, because my 8th favorite of the decade is Re:Zero. I'll admit it, I'm a sucker for isekai, and I have been since long before it was the whole big thing it is now. I grew up reading Narnia, The Magic Tollbooth, His Dark Materials, and Artemis Fowl. I was a Digimon, Monster Rancher, and Moncole Knights kid. I got super into Inuyasha. The idea that somewhere out there might be some magical other world for me to stumble into has always captivated me. And of all the anime to explore that concept this decade, at least out of the ones that played it straight, I think Re:Zero is probably the best. And not just because I like its edgy gimmick, although yeah, the idea of our hero repeatedly getting brutally murdered by the starting enemies in his RPG quest as part of an endless chain of sadistic time loops is pretty metal, as are the big crazy anime fights that each of those loops leads up to. And you know, for something that's not actually metal, the show's OST is pretty metal too. But the world that Tape Nagatsuki has built to house that concept is even metaler still. Subaru isekais into a nation in the throes of serious political upheaval, with a throne up for grabs between 5 powerful women who've been chosen to rule by ancient, inscrutable magic, and who each have different designs for the world's future. And while the capital is in turmoil, the countryside beyond its walls is beset by man-eating beasts, which range from soul-devouring devil dogs at lower levels to a massive flying whale that lives in a bank of fog and eats people's entire existences for breakfast in the boss tier. All that, and it has an interesting hard magic system. It also has something important to say though. Re:Zero turns a lens back on its prospective audience, framing its otaku hero as weak, cowardly, and self-serving, even when he's being nice. Having screwed up his old life, Subaru relishes the opportunity to start over in a new world, but he's still the same person who failed back on Earth, and starting from zero in a world with magic and swords and shit, his failings are now literally fatal. Ultimately, it's not the cheat knowledge he gains by repeating the future over and over, but the spine he grows by confronting his own shortcomings and learning from his many failures that turns Subaru into a proper hero by the show's surprisingly satisfying, especially for a light novel adaptation, ending. Very few isekai protagonists make me want to root for them like I root for Subaru. And there's no other show in this genre, at least not from this decade, that could make me not only sit through, but love unambiguously an entire episode that's just a guy standing around talking about his problems with his maid. Re:Zero's great, fuck you, fight me. Another genre I'm a sucker for is comedy, and this decade's given me a wealth of great ones to choose from, but the funniest of the bunch, far and away in my opinion, has gotta be Kyoto Animation's Nichijou, which, with its rapid-fire take on ordinary everyday life in a world that is anything but ordinary, is my 7th favorite anime of the decade. So far as its production values go, Nichijou stands head and shoulders above just about everything else in its genre. Its animated slapstick is second to none, rendered in fluid motion with stupidly ambitious layouts and shots that only a studio of KyoAni's caliber could pull off with this degree of consistency. But it's not just the incredible animation that makes this comedy work so well. Nichijou really thrives on the chemistry between its characters, who are written to bring out the best in each other, comedically speaking, mostly by getting under each other's skin. My personal favorites are the main trio, who serve as reflections of 3 prominent and conflicting aspects of adolescent psychology. Yuko is the living embodiment of youth's impulsive optimism and the incurable idiocy it often produces. Mai represents the curiosity of the developing mind, always studying and trying strange new things, sometimes to the chagrin of her friends. And Mio is horny. Way too horny. It's a big problem. And she knows it's a big problem, but she can't help it. And she's really anxious about not being able to help it, and that only makes things worse. So much worse. A lot of people get hurt. You can throw these 3 into just about any scenario, from enduring the principal's lame jokes at an assembly to being stuck in an elevator to playing Shiritori, and they will find a way to make it funny. And that's true of most of the show's cast, because as a comedy, pretty much everything in Nichijou just works. and it works really damn well. I think the same can be said for Showa Genroku Rakugo Shinju as a historical drama. Every last moving piece of this series is finely tuned to first immerse viewers in the world of pre- and eventually post-war Japan, and to fill every inch of that world with dense, palpable atmosphere. This is a story about stories, and the people who tell them as they're passed down through the generations. It's about the importance of preserving the past, but also the folly of clinging to it in the face of inevitable death and change. It's dark, and it's deep, and it's better than most of the anime you like. Hell, it's better than most of the anime I like, including a lot of the ones ahead of it on this list. All of those mean more to me personally, but few, if any of them, are this refined and well-crafted. Rakugo, the show's subject matter, is a one-man performance art that lives and dies in the subtleties of human expression. In other words, it's one of the most difficult things imaginable to try to translate into limited animation for television. And yet, director Omada Shinichi makes it look easy. When the performers of Rakugo Shinju take the stage, they practically step into the room with you. The performances in this anime are electrifying and often laugh out loud hilarious. But they're also revealing. Each one tells us just as much about the performer and what's going on in their life as it does the characters within the story they're telling. Everything in this show has more to it than there first appears, and when its mysteries are all at last finally laid bare, to say the payoff is satisfying would be an understatement. I get that, as a rule, historical dramas about obscure foreign theater genres aren't what most people are looking for in anime or entertainment in general, and this may not sound like it's your cup of tea, but trust me when I say that as soon as you start watching it, none of that will matter. Showa Genroku Rakugo Shinju is an absolute masterpiece, sublime in its construction alone, and every human being on Earth should watch it before they die. Of course, there are a lot of things we ought to do before we die, and never enough time to do them. Few things are scarier than the feeling that you're standing still as life passes you by, and sometimes the only antidote to that is to just get out of the house and go on an adventure to nowhere in particular simply because you can. That's what A Place Further Than the Universe, or Yorimoi, and its story of 14 girls embarking on a journey to Antarctica, 3 out of 4 of them just to say they've done it, is all about. Though it is also about a lot of other things too, like growing up and making friends and following your dreams and following your friends' dreams, and the fact that penguins are adorable. Speaking of adorable, it's also about 4 of the best girls ever, laughing and playing and doing a lot of cute moe stuff, but also growing fairly substantially as they become closer as friends and support each other and take on responsibilities they never imagined they could handle. It's real wholesome, heartwarming stuff, served up with a heaping helping of great comedy and a little bit of thrilling action on the side, and to wash it all down, it gives you your own tears, because goddamn is this show ever an emotional roller coaster. If you go into it expecting light and breezy, consequence-free moe cuteness, you will definitely get some of that, but at the same time, it is going to kick your heart's ass all the way to Antarctica and back again. I think you'll be glad to have taken that journey either way though, because this is one of the most uplifting and inspiring anime I've ever watched. In the 2 years since it premiered, every time I've been faced with a choice between playing it safe and doing something kinda crazy that I'll never get a chance to do again, I've heard Mari, Shirase, Hinata, and Shiraishi cheering me on in the back of my mind, telling me I can do it. And that's given me the push to make some of my best memories ever. Life's just better when you take crazy chances sometimes, especially if you have good friends to bring along for the ride. And I owe Yorimoi an eternal debt for teaching me that. When Recreators first started airing, I presumptuously labeled it as a classic in the making. And I was right, so that's that. But its status as a classic, which is factual and not debatable because that's how art works, has little to do with its high placement on this particular list. Recreators is my 4th favorite anime of the decade, not because it is a very good anime in general, although it is, but because it feels like it was precision made for me specifically. As an atheistic anime critic whose favorite topics of philosophy are the meaning of existence and the nature of art and criticism, the way this show explores both the death of God and the death of the author through the eyes of fictional characters living in the real world for whom those are the same thing. It's kind of everything I could have possibly hoped for from a big dumb reverse isekai battle royale thing. Doubly so because most of those creations are clearly based on anime, games, and books that I also happen to love. And while the show's sorta protagonist Sota can be a bit of a wet blanket, speaking as someone who's got deep-rooted anxiety and a pile of half-finished manuscripts gathering dust in my closet, that nervous, self-doubting aspiring artist really speaks to me on a deep and personal level. Recreator's biggest weakness is arguably its pacing. Cool as its characters and power sets are, they do spend an awful lot of time talking instead of fighting, and if you're not me, you might find that a bit boring, but I am me, and to me, the ideas they explore in those conversations are even more interesting than the show's phenomenal action scenes. I could easily watch an entire series of nothing but Meteora waxing philosophical about stuff, but I don't have to because, like I said, those action scenes are also pretty incredible. The show gets, like, a lot of free mileage out of the inherently cool idea of characters from different genres fighting each other, but it also puts in work to make those fights as exciting as they possibly can be through its direction, its choreography, and especially its sound design and music. Between Attack on Titan, Ald Noah Zero, and this, it's clear that nobody drops a Sawano quite like Jin Aketagawa. Recreators has a lot of fun ideas and a lot of interesting ideas, and the way that it mixes them together is, at least for me, utterly irresistible. My third favorite anime of the 2010s is one that came out right at the start of this year, The Promised Neverland, which won me over almost instantly with its amazing high concept alone. A group of smart, cheerful kids living in an idyllic countryside orphanage have their whole world upended when they learn that their home is actually a human meat farm run by monsters. Their own mother is grooming them to be eaten, and to escape that fate, they'll need to find a way to outwit her, even though she literally taught them everything they know. Now, this is a great anime in its own right, a compelling, fraught, tightly directed thriller with phenomenal music and sound design that leaves you dying to learn more at the end of each episode, and I had a blast watching it and then rewatching it like a week later, but I'll be straight with you. It only made it as high on this list as it did because of what I did after that. Or rather, what Yazzie did, because she was the one who broke first and decided to read ahead in the manga, and after she begged me for days to follow suit, I found out that it's kind of a masterpiece. Like, it is this friggin' close to supplanting FMA as my favorite fantasy manga ever. I have never in my life seen a story so deftly weave together so many different genres and crazy high concepts with nary a seam left between them. It transforms into an entirely new type of story with each arc, and tells each type with the same flair and wit that made its horrific first act so arresting. It takes its characters in fascinating, unpredictable directions, and conveys it all with dynamic panel layouts and gorgeous, surreal artwork, all while making a very compelling and nuanced case for the eating of the rich. I cannot overstate how much Yazzie and I both adore this series, this world, and especially these characters. Like, more than any other anime character save one, Emma is the person I want to be when I grow up. She solves all her problems by being really smart and really nice, and it's super fucking wholesome. Norman is so pure, but also so trapped in the idea that he has to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders. You just want to give him a big hug. And Ray is caught up between them, willing to give literally anything so that his two friends can be happy and safe. And then there's Phil. Let's just take a second to appreciate Phil. Yazzie and I are going to have a lot more to say about this series soon enough over on her channel, so please stay tuned for that. As we reach the end of this list, I'm realizing I may have shot myself in the foot a bit, because I've already made a lengthy video essay explaining why Ohana is my second favorite anime, not just of the decade, but of all time, so there's not a lot left for me to say about either show, save to reiterate what I've said before and point you to those videos if you want to hear more, but I'm gonna try anyway. Ohana is a poignant coming-of-age story about grief, survivor's guilt, and the universal struggle to come to terms with loss. Its plot, about 5 estranged childhood friends reconnecting when the ghost of their dead friend returns to them, is interesting and truly novel. Its characters are complex and well-realized, and its 11-episode run gives it just enough time to explore and develop those characters and the ideas they represent without wearing out its welcome. While no work of art is perfect, they don't get much more efficient than Ohana. Ohana. Mari Okada seemingly wrote every episode with two goals in mind: to help us empathize with these characters and to make us cry like babies. And at least as far as I'm concerned, it works every time. Though I do now have a Pavlovian response to that ending theme, so maybe I'm no longer capable of judging that objectively, but this series looks too beautiful from my subjective viewpoint for me to ever want to go back. I'm really happy to be able to sit down and just watch that ED or an episode or two with the guarantee that I'll get a good cathartic cry out of it every time. This show changed my outlook not just on anime, but on life and death themselves. More than any other work of art, unless maybe you count my own videos, it has made me who I am today. And no matter how many times I reiterate that, I don't think I can ever thank Anohana enough. But in spite of all that I owe it, Anohana is no longer my favorite anime of all time, because while it did make me who I am today, Mob Psycho 100 is the story that best embodies who I want to be in the future. I see a lot of myself in Mob, an awkward, shy kid who has difficulties with both reading other people's feelings and keeping his own in check. A kid whose supposed natural gifts do him no real favors when it comes to making friends or just being happy. And seeing that kid work so hard to improve, not by shoring up his strengths, but by addressing his own weaknesses, no matter how hard that may be, is inspiring. And the person he's grown into just by the end of season 2, the kindly young man whose greatest strength is his capacity for empathy and understanding, even though he can literally throw buildings at you with his brain, he's one of the most admirable characters in all of anime. And he only gets better from here. I'll admit that, just like The Promised Neverland, my love for this show comes not only from the anime itself, but also from what I know is coming up in the manga, where I know Mob's character arc ultimately leads and the things he accomplishes on his way there. And not just him, Reigen, Dimple, Ritsu, and everyone else who Mob is lucky enough to know. There's so much great stuff coming up involving all of them. But even if I'd never touched the source material and I didn't know any of that, I'm pretty sure this anime would still be my favorite based on the first 2 seasons alone. The story so far has been excellent, and the way that Bones has transformed one's rudimentary comic into quite possibly the most jaw-droppingly, nut-bustingly gorgeous animated series to ever bless the small screen is every bit as impressive as the original mangaka's phenomenal writing. As I said in my video about the series earlier this year, Mob Psycho 100 is the rare anime that really has it all. Great action, great comedy, great drama, and great characters. And while I think every show on this list deserves to be watched by everyone, if you only pick one, this really ought to be it. Especially since voting's coming up for the Anime Awards soon, and if Season 2 doesn't take home the Best Animation prize, we're all gonna be obligated to resent Demon Slayer a bit, probably, like we are with Hero Aka now, and I really don't want that, because Demon Slayer's a really good show too. But then, there have been a lot of really good shows in the last 10 years, far too many for me to ever do justice to all of them in one video. So I have to leave it to you, in the comments, to highlight all of the masterpieces I didn't have time for today. Thanks in advance for sharing your thoughts, and also for sticking with me through almost the entire back half of this decade. Here's to even more great anime in the next one. I'm Geoff Thew, professional shitbag, signing out from my mother's basement.